The following story contains sensitive subject matter. It is a psychological examination of a criminal investigation, told with the utmost respect for the victims and their families. Our focus is not on the details of the crimes, but on the unusual mind that planned them and the dedicated investigators who worked to bring them to light. He was the perfect neighbor. Quiet, polite, completely ordinary. No one who knew him ever suspected a thing. He had no criminal record, no history of trouble, nothing that would ever raise a red flag. He was invisible, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Then, one day, someone vanished. It started with a single person disappearing without a trace. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of violence. It was as if they had simply stepped out of their life and never returned. Soon, another person went missing, this time in a different city. Then another, from a completely different background. The cases seemed entirely unrelated. Local authorities treated each disappearance as an isolated incident, leaving families desperate for answers that never came. But deep inside the FBI, a lone analyst started to notice a faint, almost invisible thread connecting these disparate cases. The similarities were subtle, easy to dismiss. Yet, the analyst persisted, and a small, unofficial task force was quietly formed to investigate what others had overlooked. They were about to uncover a mind so calculated, it would challenge everything they knew about criminal psychology. The evidence that began to surface pointed not to a crime of passion, but to a highly organized and patient mind. The actions were deliberate, planned with chilling foresight. Supplies were purchased and stored months, sometimes years, before they were ever needed, suggesting a level of preparation that was anything but impulsive. This was not the work of someone who snapped. This was the work of a methodical thinker. He made a conscious effort to avoid patterns. The locations, the timing, and the methods were constantly changing, a deliberate strategy designed to confuse and frustrate law enforcement. What truly disturbed investigators was the psychological control he exerted. Victims weren't taken by force. They were manipulated through deception. For him, the power of control seemed more important than the act itself. This level of emotional detachment was profoundly unsettling. There were no signs of panic, no desperation, just cold, calculated execution. He was also a student of his pursuers, closely following media coverage of crimes and police procedures, and adapting his tactics based on what he learned. As the pieces came together, the FBI expanded its involvement, bringing in behavioral analysts. The case was officially labeled highly unusual, and the hunt for this ghost-like figure intensified. The break in the case came from the most unlikely of places. It wasn't a dramatic shootout or a high-speed chase. It was a minor, unrelated offense that led investigators to review surveillance footage. On the screen, they saw a man whose calmness was out of place. While others might show stress or agitation when dealing with law enforcement, he was completely serene. His body language was just off. It was enough to raise suspicion. When they finally brought him in for questioning, he was arrested without any resistance. He was cooperative, yet guarded, answering questions politely while revealing nothing of substance. The first interview was a masterclass in controlled conversation. He gave them nothing, skillfully deflecting and avoiding any direct admissions. Then, in the middle of a seemingly unrelated topic, he casually mentioned one of the missing persons by name. The interview room fell silent. In that single, chilling moment, the investigators realized the scale of what they were dealing with was far larger and far darker than they had ever imagined. The game had just begun. Once in custody, he engaged in a form of controlled cooperation. He was willing to talk, but only on his terms, setting the boundaries for what he would and would not discuss. This behavior is what truly alarmed the FBI. He appeared completely unaffected by the gravity of his situation, treating the interviews not as interrogations, but as negotiations. He would recount details with startling, factual clarity, but without a flicker of emotion. His focus was always on timelines and logistics, never on the human cost. He withheld information strategically, revealing just enough to keep investigators engaged, making them feel like they were being manipulated. The power dynamics in the room shifted. He would often wait for the full attention of everyone present before he spoke, using silence as a weapon to maintain control. Behavioral analysts quickly identified an extreme, pathological need for control and a growing desire for recognition. The agents who interviewed him described the experience as deeply unsettled. The mental toll was so significant that psychological support was recommended for the team. They weren't just interviewing a suspect. They were engaged in a battle of wills with a mind that fed on power. Teams were dispatched to remote, desolate areas, and what they found was handled with professional discretion. To protect the dignity of the victims and their families, no graphic details or images were released to the public. The focus remained squarely on collecting evidence. As the investigation deepened, more and more cold cases were connected to him, the timeline stretching back years. The true number of victims remains uncertain to this day. For the families who had spent years searching for answers, the updates were agonizing, but they finally offered a painful form of closure. During the searches, investigators also uncovered evidence of his future plans, materials, and notes that suggested he intended to continue indefinitely. The consensus among law enforcement was clear. His arrest had undoubtedly prevented more harm and saved lives. The final profile was chillingly concise, intelligent, detached, and manipulative, with an all-consuming need for control as his primary motivation. He wasn't driven by rage or greed, but by a quiet, persistent desire to orchestrate the lives and fates of others. As the case gained national attention, the suspect, who had been closely monitoring the media coverage from his cell, began to show his first signs of frustration. He grew irritated by inaccuracies in the news reports, feeling his carefully constructed narrative was being distorted. He started using his interviews to correct these details, a move that revealed his hidden vanity. In response, the FBI made a critical strategic decision. They severely restricted access to him. The interviews stopped. His platform was taken away. This loss of control triggered a noticeable change in his behavior. His cooperation ceased, and his quiet confidence began to waver. In what would be his final interview, investigators refused to engage in his games of negotiation. They met his attempts at manipulation with silence. The man who had used silence as a tool of power now found it turned against him. It was the end of the game. He finally realized his influence was gone, his audience had left, and the control he craved had been stripped away. The case was no longer a stage for his performance. It was moving toward legal resolution. In the aftermath, many questions remain unanswered. Certain details of his activities may never be known, a fact that investigators have had to accept. The case left a lasting impact on law enforcement, with many agents reflecting on the profound emotional toll of confronting such a detached and manipulative mind. Training protocols were updated, and new policies were put in place regarding how to interact with suspects who seek to use the investigation for their own psychological gratification, aiming to reduce any platforming of offenders. So why does this case endure in the annals of criminal history? It's not for the brutality of the acts, but for the chilling intelligence behind them. It serves as a stark reminder that the greatest dangers don't always announce themselves with violence and rage. Sometimes they are quiet, patient, and blend seamlessly into the background. In the end, what frightened the FBI wasn't what he did, it was how carefully he thought. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the complexities of the human mind.